All right, let's dive right in. We're going to connect the very first book of the Bible to the very last one, and we're going to do it through a single epic story. And this is a conflict you might think you know, but at its heart, at its heart is a hidden civil war, a war between giants. You've probably heard this line from Jesus 1,000 times, right? As it was in the days of Noah. And when you hear that, what do you picture? I mean, it's immediate. You think of a world just completely off the rails. Violence, corruption, and of course, giants. It's this classic picture of a world so broken that it had to be completely washed clean. Okay, but here's the thing. Here's the question that changes everything. What if the giants never actually left? I know, the common assumption is that the flood just wiped the slate clean. Giants gone. But what if that's not the whole story? What if their supposed extinction is based on just a simple misunderstanding of the text itself? Because look at this. The Bible itself, right there in Genesis chapter 6, gives us this little, often overlooked phrase, and also afterward. Did you catch that? Afterward. The scripture isn't talking about extinction, it's insisting on continuity. And that one little line, it just blows the door wide open to a completely different way of reading this whole narrative. The giants didn't disappear, they just changed.
So, okay, if they were around afterward, then where are they? Well, the key, it turns out, is hidden in a chapter that, let's be honest, a lot of people just skip over. Genesis 14. On the surface, it looks like a simple story about a bunch of warring kings. But if you look just a little closer, you start to see it for what it really is. The first ever recorded civil war among the giants.
You see, in Abraham's world, the giants were still around. But the Bible doesn't present them as these fairy tale monsters. No, it presents them as political players. You've got these names, the Rephaim, the Zuzim, the Imim, and if you cross-reference with Deuteronomy, it explicitly calls them giant clans. These weren't just random monsters, they were the entrenched powers, the mighty ruling families of their day. And they weren't just fighting for no reason. This was organized. They were all part of a system. You had this one king, Chedorlaomer, who was basically running an empire built on extraction. He forced everyone else to pay him tribute. You can think of him as the giant of giants, the top dog, with all these lesser giant clans and kings acting as his vassals, basically paying him protection money just to exist. Now this little war, this conflict, it's not just a one-off story. It actually reveals a hidden pattern, a kind of historical code that you see repeated all through the Bible. And the key to unlocking that code, well, it comes down to a very specific number. And here it is, Genesis 14, verse 4. 12 years they served. In the 13th year, they rebelled. Now, that's not just a random date. In the language of Scripture, that 13th year becomes a signal, a flashing red light for the reader. It tells you that a system built on taking and taking has finally reached its breaking point. Rebellion isn't just possible anymore, it's inevitable. And this cycle is the whole key. It's a four-step process, really. First, you have a period of ordered rule, a kind of stability, often represented by that number 12. But then that stability allows for more and more extraction, more tribute being demanded. And eventually you hit the rupture point, that 13th year, and the whole thing just explodes into conflict and ultimately judgment. This becomes the template, the pattern for understanding so much of history. It really brings to life that line from Ecclesiastes, you know? There's nothing new under the sun. But this isn't about being pessimistic. It's about pattern recognition. The Bible is trying to teach us how to see these repeating cycles of power, extraction, and rebellion playing out over and over and over again. Okay, get ready, because this is the moment where it all clicks. What you're seeing here is one single, continuous story playing out across the entire Bible. It starts in Genesis 6 with giants as physical beings controlling through brute force and violence. Then, in Genesis 14, they evolve. They become giant clans and kings controlling through tribute. And by the time we get all the way to Revelation, the giants have morphed into empires and markets, controlling the whole world through economics. It's the same pattern, the same civil war, it's just scaled up. So let's jump to the end of the book. Let's go to Revelation and see how this pattern comes to its ultimate conclusion. Because Revelation isn't describing some brand new, totally alien conflict out of nowhere. No, it's presenting the final, supersized, global version of the exact same giant civil war we first met way back in Genesis. So how does that even work? How do you go from a physical giant to a system? Well, think of it like this. The giants in Genesis were flesh and blood. They controlled a piece of land with a sword. The giants in Revelation are systems. They're these huge, sprawling economic and political structures that control the entire planet, not with spears, but with things like debt, trade, and the power of the market.
And check this out. The structure is identical to what we saw in Genesis 14. You've got your mega giant. This time it's called Babylon the Great. That's your Chedorlaomer. You've got your ruling colossi, the beast powers. You have your vassal kings, the 10 kings who serve the system. And you even have a kind of priesthood, the merchants of the earth, the ones who get rich from it all.
So what happens in Revelation? Exactly what the pattern predicts. The vassal kings, the 10 kings, they turn on the main giant, Babylon. The entire system implodes. It collapses from the inside out. It is the 13th year rebellion, but this time it's happening on a planetary scale. The system literally eats itself. And this brings us to the real heart of it all, the big takeaway. See, Revelation isn't just about predicting the future. It's actually revealing the true nature of the past. It's telling us what a giant really was, right from the very beginning. So here's the crucial definition. A giant isn't really defined by its physical size. It's defined by its disproportionate power. A giant is any concentration of strength, whether it's a person, a kingdom, or a whole market system, that just completely dwarfs ordinary people and demands tribute from them simply to survive. And you can see that evolution so clearly. The power of the giants just scales up throughout the story. It begins with raw bodily dominance in Genesis 6. It evolves into imperial dominance, these tribute systems, in Genesis 14. And it reaches its final form with total economic dominance in Revelation. So what's the ultimate tribute demanded by this final, massive giant system? Revelation 18 gives us the answer, and it's chilling. It's not just gold or spices or grain. The very last item on the cargo list for the markets of Babylon is slaves, that is human souls. It's the total, complete extraction of human life itself.
And so, we're left with this. It really reframes the whole thing, doesn't it? Revelation isn't some weird futuristic story about monsters coming back. It's the final chapter in a very, very old war. It is about the ultimate, inevitable 13th year collapse of the giant system of disproportionate power that has ruled this world in one form or another ever since the days of Noah. And I guess the question that leaves us with is, what does it mean to be living inside that system right now?